It's Good Vibrations, Mark Devlin, the latest volume, and I'm talking today with a guy that kicked off the whole series as our first guest, actually, back in 2011. I'm on the Isle of Wight chatting with David Icke about all kinds of things. How are you today, David?
Hello, Mark. Yeah, good.
I really want to ask you, we're, now, a quarter of the way into 2013.
Yeah.
It's been quite an eventful year already in a lot of ways. I really want to get your views on where you think we're at in terms of the awakening of human consciousness, of so many people finally becoming aware of what's going on in this world and what reality is anyway, versus the control system throwing everything they've got at us, because they are really stepping up the game big time right now, not least in the music industry, which we normally talk about, but in pretty much every aspect of life. And if you know what you're looking for, you see it everywhere. I just wonder if you feel there has to be a tipping point whereby either the awakening is so great that it kind of overwrites the control system and overpowers it, or if the control system steps up its game to such an extent that there's actually no turning back, and this global concentration camp that they've wanted for so long is at so advanced a stage that you can't overcome it. How do you feel about where we're now at this point?
Well, I would say either of the above, really, because we have a thing called choice. If we take the consciousness route instead of the programmed route, we have choice. Of course, if you allow yourself to be programmed with the system's version of everything, you don't have choice, because you're not in a state of mind where you have the capacity to make a choice, because you are just a repeater and a follower of the official version of everything, which is how we got into this mess. And so we have a choice. We can wake up from that and see it for what it is, and my goodness me, it's blatant now. Or we can continue down the road we're going, in which case we will be in the global concentration camp. But I remain optimistic. I remain optimistic about the outcome, but I am in no way under any illusion whatsoever about the gigantic, colossal, enormous nature of the challenge. Are we up to it? We'll see. I'm bloody up to it, I tell you. I'm going to keep going until I drop. But it's staggering to me now, and surreal, to be honest, because when I do watch the television news every now and again just to find out what they want us to believe, and I'm following all kinds of news sources on the internet every day, it's like I'm reading my own books from years and years ago, back into the 90s. Because, once you uncover the goals, where they want to take the world and the kind of society they want to create, and you understand the methods of mass mind and emotional manipulation they use to take people there, then the world becomes an open book. It's just so easy to see it. See, what people need is background. Because without the background, all they are seeing every day is a series of dots, events, situations, happenings. And of course, the mainstream media are reporting these events overwhelmingly in isolation, as an event, as an happening. They might throw another couple of dots in, but not many, not enough to make a difference. But when you spent 25 years nearly researching this, you've got this enormous wealth of background to the game, how it's played, where it wants to go. That background gives you the ability to read events like you never could if you'd not realised what the game is. It's like if you are trying to put pieces into a jigsaw puzzle, the more of the picture you see, the quicker the pieces go in, because you're starting to see what the picture is now and where the pieces go. Where are we now? Well, I tell you, we're a hell of a lot further forward than we were 20 years ago, 25 years ago. We're a hell of a lot further forward than we were 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. But are we forward enough? No, we're not. And what I'm seeing more and more, and it's something that I absolutely expected, because, in a situation where the population is being mass programmed through all the senses and through the subconscious, constantly bombarded with it. I mean, it's interesting when you think that even according to mainstream science, every second we are taking what they call impressions of our environment. And every second we're taking, they say, 11 million impressions. But the brain takes just 40 of them to construct reality that we think we're experiencing. So that's the best part, virtually entirely. 11 billion sets of information, massive amounts of information, that is not being acknowledged by the conscious mind, and is going into the subconscious mind, which then filters through to the conscious mind as what people think are their own thoughts, their own perceptions, their own views, and even right down to, I fancy a Coke, and all this stuff. So there was never going to be a situation, given that scale of programming, where this miracle was going to happen, where everyone woke up and saw it. There's a fork in the road now. I've been talking about this for a long time, but it's now so blatant, and this is the dynamic of the two. There are those that are seeing it. What they're doing is they're breaking out of mind into consciousness beyond mind. When I talk about mind, I'm talking about that level of reality that perceives through the five senses, basically, and through the conscious mind that perceives everything through the five senses. But if you open your mind to consciousness, then your point of attention moves and it becomes greatly expanded so that you can perceive the world through the five senses, but you've also got a much, much more expanded view and perception of how you view what you are seeing through the five senses. In other words, you can stand next to a house staring at a brick in the wall, and you have a certain perception of your environment. But you go on the hill over the back, and now you're seeing that brick that you were looking at, which just seemed like some reddy brown blur, what's this, is part of a house, which is part of a street, which is part of a town, which is part of and so on. And that's what happens when you expand your sense of perception. So this fork in the road is seeing the parting of the ways in terms of perception between those who are going through that process of expanded awareness and those who are becoming more and more and more programmed. This is why the difference between the two is becoming so blatant to anyone who knows what they're looking for, because it's not just that they've gone their separate ways in terms of perception. Their separate ways are getting wider and wider all the time, because one group are expanding their awareness, because the more you expand your awareness, the more you realize it's not how you thought it was, so your awareness is open to be further expanded. And then there's the programmed people who are just getting more and more programmed because they're stepping it up. I talked years ago, right at the start of this journey for me, because I came across many different sources of this, that there was a vibrational change coming, which is like an information change in the energetic fabric of our reality. You could put it simply as like, imagine the wireless internet in this room. It's not, actually, but if it was, the wireless internet in this room, and the information in it changes. So the information available changes. And the information available, if you tune into it, will change your perception of reality. But you've got to tune into it. If you are more and more and more programmed, you're not going to tune into that, because it's a different vibrational, it's a different frequency to the programmed frequency. And I was told that this vibrational change, this information change in what I call the cosmic internet, the wireless internet. And you look at my first book I ever wrote on this stuff, way back. I wrote it in a bit of a blur on what was happening to my life. It's called Truth Vibrations. I don't even know if it's still available. I think it is. I talk in there about the fact this vibrational change was coming, and it was going to awaken more and more and more people. Now, at the time, there was no evidence of it, but now there is massive evidence of it. I mean, I'm a bit of a barometer, having been on this journey through this period. I've seen incredible change in people awakening stuff. I was on a mainstream television show the other day for a change, called This Morning on independent television. I had 10 minutes, and the reaction from people who'd never heard what I really had to say was fantastic. The biggest weapon in so many ways that the conspiracy has is keeping cutting edge information about itself and about reality out of the public arena. So if you're going to find it, you basically have to trip over it, or you have to go looking for it.
How edited was your appearance on This Morning?
Well, there was a chunk taken out, yeah. One of the presenters said to me at one point, but I like I was pointing out that it was a manipulated reality, but I like my life.
Yeah.
And what I went on to say, but it was cut out, was well, that's fine. I think that's where they cut it out. But what have you got to compare it with? And it's all right saying I like my life, but you're comparing it with other people. And also, what about at the end of the week if someone came along and said, it's been nice having you on the show, but it's not kind of working. We feel that someone else... Right, are you still going to be happy with your life? So what I said in response to that was, if you were born into a lunatic asylum, a madhouse, any analogy you want, and you grew up there, and you became an adult there, and you saw nothing beyond it, that was your only reality, that craziness would become your normal. And it's interesting, I've used this phrase a few times, and I hear other people kind of basically using the same theme, which is crazy, insanity is now the new normal in this world.
True.
What's happened is that people have become so programmed that the madhouse is normal. And so what happens then, if someone goes into a lunatic asylum and says, no, this is not normal, this is crazy, what they're going to do, they're going to say, no, you're the crazy one, this is normal. And that's where we got in the world. And I think it was the last book I said this, but I certainly it was my theme at the Wembley Arena event, is that your starting point, if you're going to retain your sanity, funnily enough, is to realise this world is crazy. Okay? Everybody listening, it ain't you. It ain't you, right?
Well, the nut house is a good analogy, because that's the way it feels most of the time.
You are the sane ones, right? Just because you are not thinking the way of mainstream society, that's a good thing, because mainstream society is insane. Look at it. We accept a situation where banks lend us money that doesn't exist called credit and charges interest on it. And if we don't pay them back, they take our home, they take our land, they take our business and all the rest of it. We have this madness where, because of some non-existent illusory thing called credit, or the lack of credit, which is just figures on a screen pulled out of nothing, we have people sleeping in the streets, kids going to bed hungry, and all this stuff. It's madness. We have a president just signs death warrants for people on the other side of the world that he's never met and knows nothing about. They'll go off and drone bomb these people. We live in an insane society. There's reasons why that is and why it's insane, and I go into it in great detail in other places, but that's the starting point. And you also have to realise that actually it's run by completely demented people, because you can be demented, but you can still function. This is another thing about crazy becomes the new normal, is that demented people are seen as credible. Like I see all the time. I see demented politicians. I see demented academia. I see demented journalists. I see demented scientists. You see them fated as an expert. I mean, there's a man from, I think it's called the Goldsmith College at London University. Christopher French.
Classic guy.
He's head of psychiatry or something. Well, I've never met a psychiatrist that didn't need one personally. But this guy, he talks the most monumental crap about reality and the mind. And yet he's wheeled onto television programs as the expert. And it's just extraordinary. The world is mad.
Well, he's a professor, you see.
Oh, he's a professor, yeah. The world is mad, and it's run by mad people, but the world is so mad that they are perceived as normal and credible. This is the thing. And what happens then, Mark, is that other people looking on, who buy the idea that these people are credible and learned, bloody idiots, they judge themselves and what they feel by the fact that these credible, clever people, brackets, pillocks, most of them, are saying something different. So it must be me. It ain't you, all right? You're right.
That's right.
They are the ones talking bollocks.
That's right.
Once we realise that dynamic, I mean, I'll give you an example, mate. From way back in the 90s, I've been invited from time to time. I don't go there anymore, it's a waste of time. But to the Oxford Union. This
My hometown.
Is it? Oh, I am sorry. No, Oxford's all right.
Never went to uni, though. Very happy about it.
Well, that was the best thing ever happened to you. I never passed an exam in my life. Best thing that happened to me. Anyway, you go to this Oxford Union, which is this kind of long way back debating society that's had the prime ministers, like Nixon was there and all this people, right? And Reagan and all that stuff. Debating with Reagan, that would take long, would it? Early drinks that night, eh? But anyway, I've been there a few times to debate different subjects. And I thought, I went to Crown Hill Secondary Modern, and I left school at 15 because I'm old enough to do that, to go and play football. I never took a major exam in my life. Thank you, God, and all that stuff. So I turn up, the first one, and I think, I could be in trouble here because there's these clever people. Do you know, in all the time I've debated there, I've not been asked one single challenging question or insightful question, not once. Why? Because this is how it works. It's a system. If you go to a factory turning out burgers or processed food or something, and you see all the bits coming in and joining up on the conveyor belt, that's how the system works. But say you're making a pizza in a pizza factory, the basis of it is the base of the pizza. Everything else goes on top of that, right? Well, the base of the pizza in our system is the education system, right? So if you look at what's happening now, when I was a kid, you didn't really go to school till about 5 or something like that. We didn't have preschool. We just played and used our imagination, which opens the right side of the brain up. Nightmare for the system. The right side of the brain is something that sees pictures. It doesn't see dots, it sees pictures. So if you're doing a job like I'm doing, which is connecting dots, if my right brain was closed down, you couldn't do it. Because all you'd see would be dots and pieces. You wouldn't see the picture. And that's what they want. They want people in that mode. And so what they do is that they want to get people in the left side of the brain. They want to really stimulate that at the expense of the right side of the brain. Now, what stimulates the right side of the brain are the arts, imagination. So it's music, it's creative writing, it's literally art. Look at what's happened in state schooling all over the world. All those things are just gone. But you still had a few years before to use your imagination before you hit the left brain prison warders called school, because school's a prison. School's not a prison. Well, try not going. Hey, try not going. And you see it's a prison. They even look like prisons now. Around the corner from me where we're sitting, my kids went to that school. Open, or everything open, fine. People used to get in and play a bit of football on the pitch. No one cared because it's a community. Now there are big fences all the way around it, locks on the gates, all that stuff, right? They're prisons, and they're meant to be. I could talk about that forever. But anyway, what they're creating with this preschool and all that stuff is they are stimulating the left side of the brain earlier and earlier and earlier. Play stimulates the right side of the brain because you're using your imagination, your ad-libbing and all the rest of it. They don't want that. So they're squeezing that time as much as possible. The more they squeeze people financially, the more mothers have to go out to work to help to pay the bills, so you're into preschools and all that stuff. And then they start on this process called education. And what they do is they, from a very, very early age until way into the teens now, 5 days a week, they smack the left side of the brain with information, which is the domain of the left side of the brain. It's facts and figures and mathematics. The left side of the brain loves structure. It loves hierarchy. It sees everything as apart from everything else. And that's fine. But if that's in control and the right side of the brain is not balancing that, we become whole brain people, then we are caught in the system. So you go on and on through the education system, and if you're going to succeed in it, this is how it works. You have to be very, very good at taking the left brain information, names, dates, places, all this stuff, and remembering it, and then when you have an exam, repeating it onto an exam paper to the point where you pass the exam. And if you pass exams at school very well, if you're very good at that process, it's like, I think Einstein said something like, basically words to the effect of everyone's a genius. If you say that the criteria of academic success is climbing a tree, then what chance has the fish got, right? He said it in different words, but that was his point, and it's very true. You know, so many people go through the education system and they come out the other end with fantastic, innate gifts and abilities still in there, unseen, unbrought out, because the system only wants to turn out the kind of person that will serve the system and be a cog in the machine of the system. So, you keep passing exams, you go to university. If you pass exams really well, or your parents have got a few quid, you go to Oxford and Cambridge or the Ivy League colleges in America, like Yale and stuff. And then you go through the same process, where you tell the system what it wants to hear, and the better you do it, the more you progress. By now, there are exceptions, thank goodness, which shows the power of consciousness over mind, or consciousness over programming. But most of them are now solidly locked in the left side of the brain and solidly programmed to see the system the way the system wants. Then, because you need these university passes to go off into the institutions, then they go off to be scientists, they go off to be, politicians, they go off to be academics and journalists and all this stuff. And this is the pizza, if you like, symbolically. This is the base programming's now there. And out they go into their institutions with that base programming. They go off into law and the judiciary, it's another one. And yes, of course, into medicine and doctors to kill people with pharmaceutical drugs on a scale that beggars belief. And so that's how they build the system. So, for instance, we've had a situation here recently where a mother challenged the estranged father's desire to put their son, who had a brain tumour, through radiation. So much so it went to court. Now, when it went to court, I knew what the outcome would be, because you have the judge from the system who's been through this process I've just described, deciding if the mother has the right to try something different, or whether the doctor who says it's his only chance, poisoning him? What causes cancer? Well, radiation causes, and you're giving him radiation? Hello? Like I said, the world's freaking mad. So anyway, the judge was always going to back the doctor, because they're both expressions of the same system.
They don't like mavericks.
No, worst nightmare. Journalists come through this system, so the vast majority of them see the system as credible, and anyone challenging the system or pulling out how stupid it is, they're crazy, according to mainstream journalists. So you've got all these programmed people who've been through this system of programming, all supporting each other, and in effect telling each other they're the ones that are right. And against that edifice of stupidity and self-delusion, you have people like me saying, actually, can I put forward another idea here? Maybe you're not bloody right. And of course, then you get all the stuff. And this fork in the road, Mark, is, are people going to buy the system? Are they going to go with it and believe that that's real? Or are they going to see that there is another explanation? And of course, the vast majority are going with the system because it's all they've known. Mostly never question anything anyway. But there are a very significant number of people now, more than ever before, and getting more by the day, who are seeing it. And what I'm finding interesting is that they are people within the system now. There are scientists breaking ranks. There are doctors breaking ranks. There are academics breaking ranks. Not loudly yet, but they are reevaluating what they thought was real. And that is very, very positive, because when they funny, I was walking around London the other day doing a film about the institutions of London, and someone stopped me in the street and said, I just want to say I think you did a great job, and keep going, and I'm a serving police officer. So, there are people within these institutions who are starting to see it. And it must be a nightmare going to work every day.
Really, yeah.
Once you've seen it, and once you realise what's really going on around you.
What has the process been like for you in recent times in seeing so much of what you've talked about and written about in your books over the years come into fruition? Because on one level it must be kind of rewarding in a strange kind of way to see all these things you've talked about actually coming into place, even though they're pretty unpleasant things, and given the choice I'm sure we'd prefer them not to be in place.
Yeah.
But in the eyes of a lot of people, this must be vindicating you and validating the information that you've put across, because it's all so obvious now, and particularly with everything that you've done to expose the whole Jimmy Savile debacle, fiasco, and institutionalised paedophilia. I think that one aspect of your work has validated you in the eyes of a lot of people. What's that whole process been like for you to see it unfolding after banging this drum for so many years?
Well, it's surreal, Mark, to be honest, to see it unfolding so accurately, and it's testament to how detailed their plan is, and how they have the ability to keep to it unless it's unravelled by us. It's a time now of great opportunity and great challenge, danger, if you like. It's a challenge, and it's dangerous because this stuff is coming in, and I track it every day, and it can get very frustrating. Sometimes I said to you before we started chatting that I feel like I'm watching a road traffic accident happening in slow motion, in the sense that I'm on the other side of the street shouting at the guy about to walk in front of the truck, warning him there's a truck coming, and he's laughing at me or ignoring me, and then there's a loud bang, and you wish he hadn't. So it's frustrating in that way, and it's frustrating to see what was in the books years ago happening. It's frustrating because what we're trying to do is to alert people to it, so it's headed off at the pass, and we still have the ability to do that, but every day it's getting a greater and greater grip. And but it's a great opportunity in this sense. There's nothing that gives people more credibility than the passage of events showing that they were on the right track years ago, and that's one of the reasons so many people are coming to look at my stuff now. So that's a credibility line that's been crossed, that gives you more credibility when you're saying things that are happening now. So,
do you feel in any way that certain people are kind of willing to give you a second chance, if you like, in that you've been right about so much, they could take the Savile fiasco and say, well, he was right about that, what else could he be right about? And particularly the fact that you're being invited onto mainstream TV shows now, the Russell Brand show this morning, which never used to happen. Do you feel there's a sense in which people are kind of re-evaluating you and giving you a second chance?
Well, I think they are, and there's a few reasons for that. And I don't see it as a second chance, because I'm still on the first chance, because all I've done for the last nearly quarter of a century is speak my truth. And how people respond to it is up to them, because I'm going to speak it anyway. Gandhi said, even if you're in minority of one, the truth is still the truth. So, if no one was listening to me, I'd still be doing it, because it's what needs to be done, and you just do your best. So it's other people that perceive it as, we'll give him another chance. It's because I'm still on the first chance. Me, I've got the Sunday Times coming to do a feature for their magazine next week. All this stuff is unheard of, and I think what's happening, I had the Sunday Telegraph come to a talk I did in Croatia. You remember, you were there. And that was quite a reasonable piece. And that was a bit of a sea change in the way that I was reported. And I think what's happening is, we got this news comedy show. What is it, the news comedy show?
Have I got news for you?
I got news for you, that's it. I was on there once, a long, long time ago. And, they had a show just after I'd done the Wembley event, when thousands turned up at the Wembley Arena in 2012. And it was mentioned on there as part of a question, as part of a joke. And the presenter said, the thing was, there were 4 pictures, And who was the odd one out? And there was Gordon Brown, and there was someone else, politician stuff. There was me. And the answer was, thousands turned up to listen to me, but they'd all gone to places to speak, and no one turned up, and they had to go home. So that was a positive thing. And the guy said, yeah, but he spoke for 11 hours without notes. And what's going on? This was that bloke that was a nutter. What's going on? And I think that the media, the mainstream media, are a bit bewildered because they thought in 1991 that they had walked away leaving a dead corpse, right? And now this dead corpse is talking to thousands. And, you know, DavidIcke.com has now reached the point where we are, with this information, where we're in the top few hundred websites in Britain, we're in the top 5,000 in America, and they're supposed to be the best part of 200 million websites. And we're at the top 6,500 in the world with this information. So what they're kind of doing is going, what is going on? Because when the Sunday Times came on, you know, the point of the interview was, well, you know, we feel we've got to talk to you because you're starting to have a political influence, right? So we are in a time now, you know, keeping to the theme of the question, where there is a great opportunity. Because what you have is still just, although they're working like heck with it, with this Leveson stuff and suppressing the media and suppressing the internet, but there is still just enough freedom to circulate the information. I haven't quite locked it down yet. At the same time, when, you know, people are more open by a massive margin than ever before to the fact that the world's not like they thought it was. So this is a great opportunity. And there's another thing, you know. It's a phrase I used in talks years ago, and funny enough, it's from a song. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. When you've got something left to lose, you tend to want to defend it and protect it. And in that sense, you will do what's necessary to defend and protect it. So you might not want to lose your job. So
Witness the presenter on this morning.
Yeah. And you keep your head down, you do as you're told, and you get your rewards, or you do what the system wants. More and more, thanks to this absolutely engineered from the start to finish economic crash for reasons I can talk at length about any time. There's a lot of people out there now. I mean, you know, in this town we've got a food bank where, you know, is providing food for people who otherwise be hungry. You know, hunger and severe deprivation is not something only across the sea somewhere else now. What they put the so-called developing world through as they've raped the countries of Africa and elsewhere in the world, they're bringing that home, and it was always part of the plan. This is what this economic crash is all about. And so more and more and more people are in a situation where they've got nothing left to lose. And, you know, if you're fighting an army and you think the army's too strong for you, if you've got an escape route, you'll run. But if you get caught in a canyon and there's nowhere to run, now your response to that army is going to be different because you've got nothing left to lose. And I'm starting to feel that, you know. And it's so important, you know, anyone listening to this, if you're having a hard time financially and the world's beating you up, don't give up, right? Don't give up. You know, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Because I tell you this, and I've been saying this for years, I wish it wasn't true, but it's clearly, but it is. Where however bad people think, I said this a few years ago in 2008, however bad people think it is now, this is not a patch on where they want to go. Thus, you know, what are we going to do? Are we going to draw the line here, as we could have drawn the line before, or are we just going to allow this to happen? Just get down on our knees and be crushed? Well, I won't be bloody crushed, and please don't be crushed. This is a time to get stronger, not give up, not think that, you know, it's all too powerful. It's not. we must get stronger and we must stay bloody strong because there's a lot more we have to deal with here, and we'll deal with it a lot better if we know what we're dealing with rather than it's one kind of shock after another. Because what's happening is this, Mark. Let's talk about what they want, and that will make current events so much more understandable. Anyone seen the movie Hunger Games? For those who haven't, I'll briefly explain it. It was not actually the centre of the film, this Hunger Games, where everyone was killing everyone else and the last one standing was the winner and all that stuff, although there's a lot of symbolism in that about the world they want. What I'm talking about in terms of the Hunger Games was the way that society was structured. There was a population that was divided into sectors. Each sector had the responsibility of a certain specialisation. They were all in poverty, serious, abject poverty, and living in isolated, mega-rich, high-tech luxury in a place called the Capitol were these few people that ran everything, and they were allowed to run everything and keep people in that mass poverty servitude because they had a vicious, highly armed police state. So, this is the structure. They want a few, them, to live in this high-tech luxury. They want the masses in abject poverty serving them, and they want a police state structure of vicious oppression and suppression to keep the masses in abject poverty serving the few.
This was actually the plot line for Fritz Lang's Metropolis as well.
Well, there you go.
1926.
Well, there you
That's
go.
how far back we go for it.
Yeah, and absolutely, because it's been, this wasn't made up yesterday or last year or 10 years ago. It goes way back for reasons I can explain on another occasion. But what I've missed something out there: mega rich, abject poverty, only thing in between. Police state security force. No middle class. No middle upper class. No lower middle class. No upper working class. Absolute own everything and abject poverty. So the first stage after 2008, of course it was going on before, but the ante's been so up since then, was to crush the poor and the most vulnerable. So what they did. The banks, which are all owned by the same network of families, they crashed the economy in full knowledge that the governments they own were going to bail them out. All agreed beforehand. That's exactly what happened. In America, you had Alan Greenspan, the head of the Federal Reserve from the 80s through to 2006, orchestrated the whole thing, deregulating everything to allow unfettered greed to do what it was always going to do. He went in 2006, and in came Ben Bernanke to continue the job. They're both assets of the Rothschilds. In 2006 also, in came as Bush Treasury Secretary a guy called Hank Paulson. And he left his job as CEO of Goldman Sachs, a Rothschild-controlled mega asset of the banking cartel. Very much at the centre of the crash of Greece. So he's come in, knowing the crash is coming, because he's going to provide a solution. And the solution in 2008 from Hank Paulson was we hose money at the banks, called TARP. Then, because it's all orchestrated, along with Alan Greenspan, the preparation for the crash and the deregulation was orchestrated in cohorts with Greenspan by a man called Robert Rubin, who was the Clinton Treasury Secretary, and a guy called Larry Summers, another Clinton Treasury Secretary, and also a man called Timothy Geithner, who was president of the major bank in the Federal Reserve, the privately owned Central Bank of America, the Federal Reserve System, Timothy Geithner, who also worked with the Clinton administration. So this lot orchestrated the crash. When Obama came in, replacing Bush and Paulson, he appointed Timothy Geithner to be his Treasury Secretary and Larry Summers to be basically the number two, actually the number one, on the economic team. And what did they decide? Well, Hank Paulson was right, but he got one thing wrong. He didn't hose enough money at the banks. So what we and then of course this broke out in Europe and over here, and the same thing went on. So what was happening in this process of the governments bailing out the banks with taxpayer money and taxpayer responsible debt, well, they were transferring the debt via governments to the people. And then governments started getting into trouble, and along come the International Monetary Fund and the European Central Bank, who were owned by the very bankers and the Rothschilds that own the banking system, and they came to governments and says, well, we've got to bail you out now. You've got to bail you out because you bailed the banks out, which control us. I mean, did I say the world was mad? Did I mention that? And they said, but well, if we're going to bail you out, there's criteria, austerity programs for the people. So now we've got benefits and basic subsistence payments to the poor and most vulnerable and the disabled in this country being cut back to crushing levels. And the poor are being crushed. And it's happening in Greece, it's happening all over the place. But that's only the start. You see, this is the thing about understanding what's going on. One of the greatest, most fundamental necessities of the few controlling the many is to divide and rule the many. And it's called, it's not my problem, mate. So you have people who still have money, what they call middle class and stuff like that. They're still doing okay, not as well as they used to, but they're getting by, and they've got a nice house and all that stuff. They're looking at that, most of them are going, not my problem. Well, it is your problem, and the line to your problem was crossed very recently in Cyprus, because the precedent was set that when there's a banking crash now, as part of the bailout, and let's not forget, the bailout coming from the European Central Bank and the IMF is taxpayers' money. It's our money. The criteria now is, when there's a banking crash and they have a lot more in store, then one of the criteria is that the people in that country must share the burden. Even though British people are bailing out other European countries and all that stuff, and Cyprus have obviously been part of this bailout of other countries on some scale, they can now go into your bank account without your permission, without your say-so, and take whatever they like. And this is all part of getting deeper and deeper into levels of society that currently are doing okay and are much richer than the poor and destitute being crushed. If you see a pyramid of society, they're just climbing it. They're climbing it all the time. And to do that, they have to keep having massive economic crises. Because what they do is they create a crisis and then offer the solution to the crisis, and the solution takes them further down the road. Without the crises, they cannot do what they do. So they keep manufacturing them, and this is what's going on. And the question is, how much of it are we going to take? I mean, is where we are now not enough? You know?
One thing that I've found very intriguing in recent times is the amount of other authors and researchers that are starting to talk about off-world entities manipulating human affairs. Because the big stumbling block for you for a long time, I know, has been people that have said, well, you know, he talks a lot of sense when he goes into the political real world stuff, and, you know, a lot of what he says resonates with me, but when he starts talking about these bloody reptilians, you know, that's where he loses me. I think Alex Jones said something like that at one point.
You don't say it now, though.
But it's been very interesting for me to see the vast number of other researchers that are talking about these entities, whether they're called the archons or, jinn, demons, whatever name you want to put on it. There's a lot of people talking about this now. I was chatting to a guy just the other week doing a podcast volume called Lennon Honor, who talks about all the symbolism in music videos and films. And at the very end of the conversation, he said to me, and by the way, what we're dealing with here is entities not of this world, controlling and manipulating human affairs. So very interesting that a number of other people are now talking about this one aspect of your work that has been a problem for people for so long.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's what I'm finding. Because in the end, you know, you can search around for explanations of why the world is as it is, and why, for instance, people long ago would manipulate the society to move it in the direction that we're talking about centuries ago, because that's how far it goes back, when they knew they were not going to be around when it happened. So the question I asked a long time ago was, what's the common theme? What's the common link that connects all of these people over, well, it's thousands of years actually, but very demonstrably hundreds in terms of these secret societies and these families? Why? And this is why I talk so much about the nature of reality. Because if we don't understand that, we're never going to get it. When we look through our eyes, we see only a narrow band of frequency called visible light. It's tiny compared with what even mainstream science says exists in the universe. Thus, it's like we are listening or we are perceiving a television channel or a radio channel. But of course, as we know, there are loads of television channels and there are loads of radio channels, and they share the same space. But they're on different frequencies, they're on different wavelengths, and so they interfere with each other. But if you get two radio stations very close to each other, then there can be interference. The main station is still the dominant one, but there's interference, right? Well, in symbolic terms, even more than that, in fact, that's the situation we face. You know, we think when we're looking out of our eyes, we're seeing a world. We're not. We're seeing a frequency band. And we're seeing what exists within that frequency band. And if something enters that frequency band and then leaves it, to the observer, it's appeared out of nowhere and disappeared out of nowhere. But it hasn't. It's just left the frequency that we can decode. And there are entities, as you say, they're called different names by different cultures, but they're all describing the same thing. They call them archons in documents left by the Gnostic people from something like 2,000 years ago. They're called flyers by Central American shaman. They're called demons by Christians. They're called jinn by Islamic people, and loads and loads of different names. But they're describing the same thing. And these operate in a different frequency band, but it is incredibly close to this one. And there's interaction between the two. But because they are too far off our frequency band, and our atmosphere doesn't suit them, to manipulate our world, they've had to put hybrids, part human, part them, into our reality, who can take the atmosphere and are in frequency compatibility, to actually dictate our society on their behalf. So even when you look at the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and the royal families of Europe and the aristocracy, not all in terms of the aristocracy, but the vast majority, they worship these entities. They are their gods. These were the gods that were described in the ancient world. This is why the Chinese emperors used to say, or used to claim the right to be emperor, because they were genetically connected and descending from the serpent gods, as they call them. Because these entities are not all reptilian in type. What we call the Greys are part of it as well. I tell you what's amazing, you know, there were documents, texts found in a glass jar buried in Egypt in 1945, written by the Gnostic people from about 2,000 years ago. And about a fifth of the text talks about the archons, and it describes them. These are texts that have not been seen for 2,000 years. The Gnostics were the people that ran the great library at Alexandria, which had all these fantastic ancient scrolls and knowledge from the ancient world, which was destroyed by the Roman Catholic Church, but the Roman Church. But they talk in these texts about entities that are reptilian and ones that look like, in effect, grey fetuses, which are the greys with the bulbous eyes. Now, we have people now saying that they've had experiences with these entities in what we call, 2013, but with times another illusion, which were mentioned in text 2,000 years ago. This is the point, Mark, you see. While people were knocking rocks together within our reality, these entities were there with all their high tech. But you can't give a computer to someone knocking rocks together. You have to manipulate society to the point where it can handle it. Now, this is a real crucial area. They have to bring you to a point where you're intelligent enough to use the computer, but not intelligent enough to see what the game is. And you know all this high-tech stuff that suddenly appears? And there's the cover story about these kids invented it in their garage. Bollocks! It comes out of the underground bases, but and the interaction with these entities. And it requires, therefore, an explanation of where it came from. And the explanation is the cover story.
Mark Zuckerberg and all the others.
And then you get these people, and their reward is to become fantastically wealthy. But part of the deal of becoming fantastically wealthy is that a great percentage of the money gets spent on the conspiracy. Now, you look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? It is funding virtually every pillar of this conspiracy that I've been exposing for nearly a quarter of a century. That is not an accident. This guy has got $500,000, 500,000 shares rather, in Monsanto. Unbelievable. That's destroying the health of America and anyone else that eats this genetically modified food, which is designed to genetically modify us. I mean, I could talk forever about the way that this is mutating the human species. This is what's going on. And so these entities are introducing this stuff. And of course, the great centralized Orwellian constant total surveillance dictatorship could not exist without computers and all this stuff. So they're introduced at the time that people can handle them. They've reached an intellectual level where they can handle them, but not a consciousness level where they can see what it's all about. And it's about control. And there's stuff in the underground bases, light years ahead of anything we see in the arena. Have you noticed that, it's coming in faster and faster and faster and faster? As they're pushing things along, they're just bringing the technology into place that allows it to get more and more extreme.
Yeah. Not all of us are impressed by technology. I still read maps. I don't have sat-nav.
Me neither.
And all the rest of it. What's wrong with reading a map? It's not difficult.
I said that to a taxi driver once. He thought I was from another planet.
He wouldn't be the first.
No.
As we start to wrap it up then, on your TV appearance on This Morning, you made a reference to a new Wembley show in 2014.
Yeah.
Also, I believe you're working on a new book. Do you want to tell us about both of those projects?
You've got a rare moment of me not in that little office down the way, because I've been working on this book since about this time last year, and then I took a few months off from it to prepare for the Wembley event for October, and I picked it up immediately afterwards. I mean, I'm getting up in the morning and going through until I'm nodding off with it every day, and I've reached the point now where it's pretty much going to be finished by the end of April, and I absolutely want it circulating by October. And why I'm very keen to get it out there is, first of all, it's the best thing I've ever done, and because the thing is, the more you understand, you cross a line where suddenly the kaleidoscope moves and everything is crystal clear, right? And that around the Wembley event, something like that happened to me. It's the biggest book I've ever written. God dear, is it? It's going to be about 800 to 900 pages. It's got going to have about 800 illustrations, 420,000 words, and it's one theme, which is what's happening in the world and why. But it just connects an enormous number of different subjects. Everything from the nature of reality, every subject you can think of, right down to what's happening today, and fits it together. And in effect, what I've tried to do is to take all the pieces and put them in a picture. And so I'm very excited about that, because I'm delighted with the way it's turned out. And Wembley, October 2014, yes, we're definitely doing another one, absolutely, because the last one was so successful and so many people came and saw it for the first time that it was very, very effective. And the media ignored it virtually. they ain't going to ignore the next one because of what's happening or going to happen between now and then.